Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the LA Mayor's Manufacturing Summit 2020 with Mayor Eric Garcetti. Our focus this year will be COVID-19 response, economic recovery, and increasing resiliency. I'm Linda Rosenberg, a client advisor with California Manufacturing Technology Consulting, or CMTC. We have an exciting lineup for this event. First, we'll be hearing from our mayor, Mayor Garcetti. Then Mayor Garcetti will lead a panel discussion about COVID-19 impact on LA's manufacturing sector. Following that, I will lead a panel discussion with CMTC on economic recovery resources to help small to mid-sized manufacturers in California. After that, John Dyke, CEO of CESMII, will discuss increasing resilience in manufacturing by establishing a national manufacturing guard. We will have time for Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions, please be sure to place them in the Q&A panel on screen, and we will get to them at the end. We'll also talk about how to request assistance as well at the end of this summit. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the organizations participating in today's summit. CMTC is a nonprofit consulting and training organization, partly funded by the Department of Commerce. CMTC's entire mission is to help small to mid-sized manufacturers in California grow profitably, improve productivity, quality, and safety, overcome challenges, and save money. CMTC has helped thousands of manufacturers since 1987. The Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Institute, or CESMII, was created in 2017 by the U.S. Government Department of Energy as a nonprofit institute to drive smart manufacturing adoption throughout the United States manufacturing industry. By enabling the frictionless movement of data between real-time operations, people, and systems, CESMII is ensuring the power of information and innovation is at the fingertips of everyone who touches manufacturing and makes key decisions. The U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing, or CAM, is conducting cutting-edge research on the future of robotics and additive manufacturing. Saving the best for last, this event was made possible through the leadership of Mayor Garcetti. Through the mayor's leadership, Los Angeles became the first major city to offer free COVID-19 testing for all residents. The mayor has launched several initiatives to work with manufacturers directly to secure the necessary equipment to respond to COVID-19. Through Logistics Victory Los Angeles, or LOVE-LA, the Port of Los Angeles has procured needed supplies directly from manufacturers. This includes procuring 24 million N95 masks from Honeywell. The mayor also launched LA Protects to help organize the garment industry to manufacture high-grade facial coverings. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Mayor Garcetti.
Well, thank you, Linda, so much for the introduction. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for kicking off the post-Dodgers victory. I hope all of you stayed up late celebrating, at home, of course, safely. It was an amazing evening, and what a great LA sports October this has been. But I'm so excited to be with everybody, really building on 7 years, now this is the 8th year, of focusing on manufacturing from City Hall, something that City Hall had dropped the ball on for many decades. And while Los Angeles remained the manufacturing capital of the country, we had not really focused on those policies and those personnel that could look at the work that we could do to make sure that manufacturing would continue to have a home in the next generation. We're so proud of LA's history as being a place that builds things, that has won wars because of the aerospace industry, that's put people into the heavens, that is now doing transportation innovation, that's done everything from clothes manufacturing to biomed manufacturing. And we wanted to see what we could do to really continue that forward. And so it was in my first year as mayor, together with the Annenberg Foundation, that we launched AMP SoCal and was able to focus on some very key manufacturing industries for the first time from City Hall with an academic partner at USC, and to really bring billions of dollars in private and public investments that used to go other places by unifying our region, bring Ventura, Los Angeles, Orange, and San Diego counties together to apply together with the federal government instead of compete with one another. Our LA Made campaign and our work each year to focus on those local manufacturers and to promote them, and to look at the personnel and workforce issues that they have, the regulatory and red tape issues they have, as well as the access to capital and technological innovation. We are so excited to be really pushing manufacturing and seeing, even in the toughest of times, the work moving forward. And this year, as you said, Linda, we are reminded just how important it is to make things. You know, I've often said that we're left with two things at the end of our days on this earth: who we knew and what we did. But for somebody who's a manufacturer, maybe you could take that and say, really, it's who we knew and what we made. And who we knew, we're blessed. We're blessed here to be in Los Angeles, the crossroads of the world, the northern capital of Latin America and western capital of the United States, eastern capital of the Pacific Rim, the busiest container port in the Americas, the fourth busiest airport in the world. And in a moment like COVID pandemic, we see that potential that we have, the millions of masks that we made here when we were the first city to mandate masks. And then people said, okay, where do I get them? And everywhere from making sure that they were in our vulnerable populations, whether that's people who are unhoused or seniors, first responders, or whether it was, as you mentioned, getting the medical grade masks that people could then use. We're actually supplying those at cost to our hospitals so they never have to worry, no matter how good or how bad this pandemic gets. We know that we have that box checked off at a competitive and inexpensive price, American made, just down the 10 freeway. So all of us are looking, I think, in a way that we never have before at the importance of this. But it's also part of how we're going to not just respond to this pandemic, not just rebuild from this pandemic, but reimagine the next iteration of our economy from this moment. And so we're so excited that work, whether it was business ambassadors visiting 625 manufacturing sites to help people comply with protocols and keep workers safe and keep jobs going, or whether it was, watching manufacturers pivot on what they were making to be able to meet this moment. This is really a story of grit and of resolve, of the spirit of the City of Angels. And despite that success, and despite a spike in some demand for manufacturers, we know that plenty of businesses are hurting, really hurting. So we're going to take a critical step forward, and our partnership with Sesame has been incredible too. That's really the chapter I forgot to highlight, which shows that Los Angeles will continue to lead. But alongside CMTC, we are launching today Recovery Roadmaps, which is an effort to provide vital assistance to 3,500 manufacturers across Los Angeles by this time next year. That's almost 10 a day, every day, including weekends. And they're personalized action plans for business owners to use, to recover, and to adapt, and to expand into new markets, establish new partnerships. And it's going to be rooted in listening to you. So be the co-architects of this moment. We want to hear from leaders in manufacturing about what you need, what we can do better, how we can be your voice at the county, regional, state, and federal level for the legislation, for the assistance that you need. And that starts today with a really exciting panel. So let's jump in, and I'm your moderator for our first channel. Let me introduce the panelists. Jim Watson is a great friend. He is the president of California Manufacturing Technology Consulting. CMTC, the partner that I mentioned, and what we're going to be doing is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center for the state of California. They're federally funded by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology to provide that technical assistance to manufacturers. And each year they help about 1,500 medium and small size manufacturers across the state. Thank you, Jim, for being here. Dr. Gupta, S.K. Gupta, is the director of USC Center for Advanced Manufacturing. He's a nationally recognized research scientist in robotics and 3D printing, has helped lead the way during this pandemic of all of the work that USC has been doing to help with PPE and other things, and also just been a key partner in so much we have done. Welcome, Dr. Gupta. Great to have you here as well. And we're joined as well by Joe Dyke, who is the CEO of Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Institute of CESMII. CESMII, as I mentioned, is a partnership between the City of LA, UCLA, and the US Department of Energy. CESMII and its partners are investing $140 million to develop and deploy smart manufacturing technologies across the US and with US manufacturers to help them be more competitive and energy efficient. So thank you as well, Joe, for being here as well. And Jim, let me start with you. You lead CMTC, so you probably get in contact with more manufacturers than anybody listening or anybody watching this today. What services have you been providing in the pandemic, in the midst of COVID-19 for manufacturers that's changed from what you would have done a year earlier? And how have these manufacturers been impacted by COVID-19? And what should they know about navigating this moment?
Well, first of all, Mayor, I'd like to thank you for your leadership on making manufacturing a focus. LA is definitely leading the state when it comes to manufacturing and how the city and the county is addressing manufacturing. So thank you very much for your leadership. First of all, I think CMTC is providing a number of health and safety kind of assistance in a number of different forms. Since May, we've been providing and conducting a series of educational webinars. There are two tracks. One of them is on HR, which is helping manufacturers manage the employment policies and legislations that's taking place here in our state. It's providing guidance on benefits, time off, and employee communications. The second track is on workplace safety, which is dealing with how to enhance safety in the workplace and leveraging best practices that have been would have been shown as best practices by manufacturers across the nation. We are also changing with the times as well. We are adding new webinars. Our latest webinar we're putting together is addressing employee morale. The one thing that we're finding is that because of the bit of isolation that's going in manufacturing, the socialness of manufacturing is kind of diminishing, that employee morale needs to be addressed in order to keep a workplace not only safe, but enjoyable for the employees. We've also built our website as a hub for providing a broad range of materials and on safety, including anything regarding the county, the city, the state, and the federal guidances that are out there. Our return to work guide has been downloaded by hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers. And then last, we are providing remote training and assistance for manufacturers in addressing their HR challenges and helping them implement their safety measures. We have a new service called Work Safety Health Check, which is providing 24 hours of low and no cost service on training. These modules will address OSHA, COVID-19, and plant safety compliance. And I think at the end of this, end of these panels, I think there's a person, if you want to get a health check, you can talk to them and make an appointment. So that's what we've been doing in terms of trying to get the word out on safety in the workplace. Now, when it comes to what's been impacting manufacturing, you know, we've probably assessed hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers in the last 4 or 5 months, and there are 4 issues that come up consistently, and they're not surprising. The first one is workforce, and that's really about the sizing of the workforce up and down because of the demand that is variable, and it's very hard to staff your facility when your demand is variable. And this even is a problem for manufacturers that are doing extremely well. And there are a number of manufacturers in our state that are hiring. In fact, 30% of manufacturers are hiring at this point. The problem is they're having trouble finding skilled workers. The second issue is productivity. Because of staffing challenges and supply chain challenges, what's happening is it's impacting the efficiencies of production, which is increasing cost. That's then also coupled up with the fact that on the finance side, that the average revenue was down about 20% for manufacturers, not only in our state, but in the nation. And then that's followed up by supply chain disruption, which is impacting their ability to get materials on time or get materials at all, which is now pushing about half the manufacturers who have been offshoring to look for local suppliers, which hopefully will create jobs in our county, city, and our state. And how to deal with this? We've developed a broad network of resources, expertise, and connections that can help a manufacturer with just about anything they need. We would hope that our manufacturers would use CMTC as a bridge to meet their challenges and to get solutions, whether it's sales and marketing, access to capital, supplier scouting, workforce training. CMTC or one of our partners can help. And our role is to get the right resource to solve the right challenge. And all of these resources are available on our website. very easy to find. It's www.cmtc.com. And if you click on COVID resources, you'll find all of the resources that are available to handle any solution, to provide any solution that a manufacturer may have.
Thank you. Before I get to John and SK, I want to ask you something that I'm going to come back to, but I'll give you a moment to think about whether onshoring is just a short-term trend or whether you see some permanent changes that will come out of this, that will onshore manufacturing, either because a national strategic standpoint or from a logistical standpoint. So I'm going to flag that as well. So let me go to SK now. And SK, you were, and then I'll come to you, John. SK, you had an amazing initiative that really focused at USC on helping manufacture in the short term in the midst of all of this. That was 3D respirator masks and other items. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that project? Who did you bring together and what were you able to accomplish?
Sure. So when we were dealing with shortage of PPEs, the face shields and respirators, so we had to make sure that we can basically get them fabricated locally. We had large number of 3D printers in our regions, and of course a lot of designs which were posted. However, many of those were not well vetted and tested. So what we had to do was bring in medical school people who were willing to look at those designs and get them tested to make sure that they were safe to use. Then we had to bring in basically all the volunteers who were willing to help in transporting the materials and bringing it to the places where people had capacity to do 3D printing, and then creating basically assembly places where people could assemble that. So it was community effort. We had to bring in medical expertise, people who had 3D printers and volunteers, so that we can create these PPEs quickly, and as well as make sure that these PPEs were safe. So we have built capacity, and we have now several designs. So should we need this, we have now capacity, design, know-how, and volunteers who can go ahead and do it.
Things when I went down there to USC to see it was hearing how quick that feedback loop was. I think we can all say in a pandemic and in a crisis, suddenly the things that take iterations of weeks and months or even years suddenly become hours and days. So the doctors saying, fix this, change this specification from County USC that were giving you that feedback. I was amazed at how quick that loop was. I think bureaucratically we found the same things. I've said during this crisis, leadership really is about making quick decisions and trying things, not about waiting for others to figure them out. Was that a lesson that you learned in this as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And also, often we had to change designs because one of the supply of the material was not available. So how do you quickly, but also do it very safely. Make sure that we don't post things out there which are gonna, in the end, cause more damage than good. So, do things fast and yet, keep your eye on safety. That was kind of our principle, basically.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, SK. And John, I'm one of your best shills for promoting CESMII, but a lot of people still don't know that we have a National Innovation Institute dedicated to manufacturing right here in LA. And you're developing smart manufacturing tools that can help large as well as small and medium-sized businesses become much more efficient. And we're really blessed to have this partnership. Smart manufacturing, how has that evolved in this crisis? Is it helping our manufacturing community becoming more resilient? And for manufacturers who are tuning in live or watching this in a recording, what should they do today to become more innovative and protect and grow their business? Whether it's, looking at new technologies that are there or different ways that they're looking at workforce and productivity and wages.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mayor Garcetti. We too are truly grateful for your partnership. It's been a real privilege to work closely with you and the City of LA as we partner to help manufacturers of all sizes and all industries on their journey to smart manufacturing. Our overarching strategy here at CESMII is to accelerate the democratization of smart manufacturing, which means that we're laser focused on reducing the cost and complexity of how we can use information to transform our manufacturing operations here in the US, thus truly making it significantly more affordable and accessible for all manufacturers. We're able to fund the research and real innovation that that's required to make smart manufacturing technologies accessible, And a big part of that is to bring the brightest minds from this ecosystem to bear on real manufacturing challenges. And clearly that was never more important and urgent as COVID hit us here earlier this year. In terms of how we're helping and can help manufacturers become more resilient, the basic assumption is that manufacturing profitability and productivity will be dramatically impacted by using smart manufacturing technology and knowledge. And COVID-19 made that clearer than ever before. Those manufacturers that are able to evolve and focus on these initiatives are the ones that are going to emerge from this challenging time positioned to be differentiated and be more competitive than their peers. We have a couple of practical and helpful ways to engage with manufacturers, both to educate them and to invest in actual smart manufacturing deployments through project funding and project grants. And we've recently announced a great new way to do that. We have a new class of projects that we were excited to launch recently called Smart Manufacturing Innovation Projects. And that's specifically restructuring our grant process to make it attractive, particularly for small and medium manufacturers, so that they can engage as well, so we can work with them and inspire them, understand their challenges, to employ and use and really benefit from the types of capabilities that largely are today most accessible for the large manufacturing community. I also wanted to highlight that we enjoy a great partnership with CMTC as well. And one of the practical things that we're doing with them is co-leading what we call an affinity group. We have them for a number of different industries, but specifically with CMTC, we're partnering to co-lead our affinity group for small and medium manufacturers. This is a great way for us to engage that ecosystem, not just the manufacturers, but those organizations that are there to serve those manufacturers as well, from a technology perspective, from an education perspective, and understand their needs, but also make sure that the things that we're doing, the technologies we're investing in, both in the short term and in the more strategic long term, are those that are going to be most helpful for that ecosystem. And so from our perspective, we're thrilled to be here in the city of LA. We're thrilled to partner with you, and we appreciate the chance to have this conversation with you. The work that we've been able to do to both in the short term help with those manufacturers impacted by COVID-19, as well as the longer term strategic future for manufacturers here in this region.
For John. So we've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you each a 1 minute lightning round question. Jim, you already know yours about onshoring, so that's going to be yours. Dr. Gupta, I wanted to ask what key industries, manufacturing industries, you see LA particularly ripe for to either expand or locate. And then John, if you'll answer, what is the biggest energy change? Because we're at a moment, obviously, with record fires and heat and all this stuff. So as we look at an energy transformation of how we get energy, what is that biggest change on the manufacturing side? And what do you think positions LA well to benefit from that? So first, Jim, do you think this is just a moment of onshoring because everybody can't get their supplies, but it's going to go back, or do we have some real gains we could solidify?
No, I think there's time for us to make the gains. I think, but there is a finite time. And I look at this a little different. It's just onshoring. I look about it, I talk about it a little bit as import replacement. You know, we make a lot of great things here that are made offshore, pumps, motors, all these kinds of things. Manufacturers make them here in California. And there's no reason why we can't partner up with organizations like CESMII to get their costs in line, to make the connection so they can actually replace a product that's being imported with a product that's being made here in California. And customers will pay more. So I think there's a great time to do it. We've got to get the costs down. We've got to work with manufacturers. We got to integrate smart manufacturing techniques. And in doing that, we can make the connections and bring production back.
Great. Dr. Gupta, any sectors in particular LA is fertile for?
I think both aerospace and biomedical will be great for LA as these two sectors start embracing more and more advanced manufacturing technologies such as additive and 3D printing and robotics and general principles of smart manufacturing. Both of these sectors will be great for LA. I mean, they already have a strong presence, and these are high-tech sectors, and LA provides them the right kind of people who can work on it. And LA also has, many great hospitals.
Mhm.
So I
Absolutely.
think these sectors would be fantastic for LA, in the future.
Great, thank you. And John, take us to energy. Take us out with some energy.
Yeah, sounds great. Obviously, from our perspective, whether a manufacturer realizes that energy is on their bill of materials or not, whether they perceive it that way or not, it's an enormous portion of what the ingredients for their manufacturing process. And from our perspective, one of the unique things that we've seen is that any focus on smart manufacturing will create a more efficient process, will reduce waste, will create productivity. And those can absolutely, without a shadow of doubt, be translated to energy productivity and energy efficiency. At the end of the day, reduce energy costs for those manufacturers. And in most cases, reduce energy consumption as well. So those are these sort of very significant but often indirect areas that technology can impact both energy consumption and energy productivity. Obviously, the real significant opportunity we have here is on clean energy sources as well. So from our perspective, those are really unique opportunities and ways and areas that we're looking to invest in as aggressively as we can to facilitate a much more efficient, clean energy production environment for the state and for the nation.
Well, thank you so much, John Dyck, Dr. S.K. Gupta, Jim Watson. Thank you for kicking this off. Linda, thank you for really kicking it off. I will toss it back to you, and thank you everybody for participating. I'm looking forward to some of the other panels we're going to be and sessions that we're going to have. And let's keep that manufacturing in LA. I'm the grandson of a manufacturer who is the son of an immigrant in Los Angeles. I wouldn't be here today as your mayor if he hadn't been able to manufacture right here in Los Angeles. And so I'm so excited to continue that legacy, to push through this tough year. Look out for your own mental, spiritual well-being in a tough year where I know we've all shouldered a lot of pain and some suffering of loved ones. But we will get through this, and we won't just rebuild. We will reimagine the next chapter of our LA and our California history. Thank you. And Linda, back to you. And thank you, Ricardo Vasquez, by the way. Ricardo Vasquez from my team, I just wanted to give a shout out to. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Garcetti. And thank you to Jim, John, and Dr. Gupta. We'll be switching gears right now. And we'll have a discussion with CMTC about no-cost and low-cost resources that are available to small to medium-sized manufacturers to help guide them through this challenging economic environment. As I mentioned, I'm Linda Rosenberg. I'm a client advisor with CMTC, and I help manufacturers in LA County as a strategic advisor and coach. I'm pleased to welcome our three panelists from CMTC. Elliot Dratch is the quality practice lead and a safety and operations expert. Gary Steinberg leads CMTC's supply chain scouting and matching program. And Chris Meraki is manager of field operations, leading a team of client advisors focused on growth, development, and solutions for our clients. So welcome to Elliot, Gary, and Chris. I'd like to start with a question for Elliot. Elliot, how has CMTC enhanced the City of LA's goal of mitigating the impact of COVID-19? And how can local manufacturers get assistance with their own COVID-19 controls?
Well, thank you very much, Linda. CMTC has been delivering monthly technical webinars of interest to manufacturing companies. And we've been trying to guide these manufacturers through new and different human resources and manufacturing situations. For instance, in our webinars on human resources and workforce issues, we answer questions like, can an employer require their employees to self-quarantine after travel? And we've also been delivering a popular webinar series that provides guidance on reducing COVID-19 exposures in their manufacturing facilities. We describe the recommended engineering controls to improve their air handling in their plants, plus the administrative controls needed in their break rooms, locker areas, bathrooms, and time clock stations. And we really drive home the point that PPE needs to be considered as their last line of defense. The feedback from the manufacturing community is that we're really assisting them with these technical webinars, and they're very appreciative. So I got introduced to the folks at the City of Los Angeles as a result of their need for COVID manufacturing information. And I found it different than our consulting engagements. It's been really gratifying to work on projects that improve public health and the public good. It's been a great collaboration. This branch of our relationship with the city really began at the beginning of the pandemic. And that's when I was introduced to Ricardo Vasquez. And Ricardo was searching for additional PPE for the city to backfill their emergency needs for disinfectant, rubber gloves, face coverings, and protective gowns. We immediately began calling our database of suppliers, and we qualified those that had the capability to deliver product. Thankfully, our backup supply wasn't needed, but we were fully mobilized. We were ready to blend truckloads of special disinfectant to ship to the city's medical centers. Because we have expertise in supply chain development and product sourcing, it was a natural fit. And every night for about 5 weeks, we updated the product inventory throughout Los Angeles, and we sent it to Ricardo so that the city's special procurement task force always had current information. Our community relationships have grown, which recently led to CMTC organizing a roundtable with the leaders in the manufacturing community to discuss the creation of public health councils. These public health councils will promote better compliance to the safety protocols with manufacturers to reduce the spread of COVID in their workplaces. So we hosted a webinar with the presidents of about a dozen manufacturers, and the county took their comments back to the Board of Supervisors. It was very empowering to watch government give a voice to these stakeholders. Also, back in March, we began inviting staff from the Department of Public Health to join our COVID webinars, which really added a new dimension, to have medical experts address the medical questions from our manufacturers. So CMTC provides the direction on manufacturing floor changes, and the county has provided public health nurses and even an MD to answer medical questions. We've had about 1,000 individual registrations for this webinar, and it's been very successful. So our focus has evolved into helping Los Angeles keep businesses open and commerce flowing. We have about 20 business stabilization consultants that have been assisting manufacturers by giving them COVID impact assessments to understand their pain points. And they'll write a findings report and an action plan, and can even help these manufacturers access funding offsets to address their specific needs. We also provide supplier scouting and matching to match suppliers with buyers. And Gary will tell you about that service in just a few minutes. And of course, we provide our core consulting services, some of which are at no cost. And just recently, one of the webinar attendees needed emergency help with a COVID situation at their food manufacturing plant. So we dropped everything to help them that afternoon, which they so much appreciated. And we work with all manufacturing sectors: food, apparel, consumer products, laboratories, and industrial. I feel really good about our relationship with the City of LA because we've successfully bridged the gap that existed between industry and government. And we're both working to improve the public's welfare, which many of us find quite rewarding.
Thank you so much, Elliot. It sounds like it's been very gratifying to be involved very much at a macro level and a micro level in helping the city, the community, and manufacturers respond to and get through and thrive during this pandemic. Thank you so much. Gary, question for you. How has COVID-19 impacted supply chains? What types of challenges and opportunities are you seeing, and how can CMTC help?
Well, thank you, Linda, for having me today. Appreciate that. Well, according to a recent survey conducted by the Accenture Consulting Group, 94% of all Fortune 1000 companies have been impacted negatively due to the pandemic in their supply chains. So as a result, manufacturers have experienced extended lead times, higher costs, and in the worst case, orders for products have been canceled and materials have been canceled. Now in the public sector, we've experienced major breakdown in our domestic supply chain, as well as in our global supply chain, to meet the needs of PPE for our first responders and for frontline medical workers. In regards to ventilators, N95 respirators, disposable gloves, and protective gowns. So in terms of a challenge that we have, well, the challenge obviously is real. And because of our disrupted supply chain and lack of products and extended lead times for our manufacturing community, starting in March through the CARES Act funding, CMTC dedicated itself to provide a supplier scouting and matching program at no fee to the manufacturing community. As Elliot mentioned, CMTC immediately began to source PPE equipment in support of the City of Los Angeles and its public sectors. CMTC has also been supporting our local supply manufacturing organizations to source not only PPE equipment, but other types of commodities and materials such as packaging solutions, custom molded parts, contract assembly services, and metal fabricated parts. We now, as Jim Watson mentioned, we now have a tremendous opportunity to reshore and bring our supply chains back from China and Asia. In closing, CMTC is here to help our manufacturing community to locate sources for PPE, as well as other parts and materials that have been impacted by the pandemic. Please contact CMTC for further information regarding our no-fee supplier and matching program. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. Chris, I have a question for you. How have manufacturers' sales been impacted by COVID-19? How is CMTC working with manufacturers to help companies navigate these impacts and grow?
Well, thanks for the question, Linda. You know, the answer to that question is probably a little bit more complex than most people would imagine. One might assume that the impact on sales has been mostly negative, but that's not necessarily the case. COVID-19 has impacted manufacturing clients in a number of different ways, depending upon the type of industry the manufacturer is in and whether the manufacturer was designated an essential business or not. But generally, there are three different ways that manufacturers have been impacted. First, sales decline. Yes, many manufacturers did in fact experience a significant decline in sales. I think Jim cited that most companies are off about 20% in revenue, some more than that. And that was especially significant in the early months of the pandemic back in Q1 and Q2 of this year. And there's a few reasons for that. One was manufacturers that were designated as non-essential were hit the hardest. With employees unable to go back to work, the companies had no way to make the products that they produce to support the customers within the industries that they serve. And many of these unfortunately went out of business. Second reason is due to industry downturns. Those manufacturers that supply the aerospace and automotive industries, for example, were significantly impacted and continue to be impacted due to COVID-19. Boeing, for example, put a hold on ordering new parts until they burned through existing inventories. And with the subsequent announcement of their shutting down their Everett, Washington facility that makes the 787 Dreamliners, that's further impacting suppliers, many of whom are based here in Southern California. And in third, and as Gary was noting, related to the earlier 2 points, is supplier reduction. Companies that were fortunate enough not to be impacted by a non-essential designation or industry downturns may have been impacted by a reduction of manufacturers within their supply chain that were not as fortunate. Without having a robust supply chain in place, these manufacturers have missed shipping deadlines or had to turn down orders altogether. The second potential outcome is an increase in sales, and it may be counterintuitive, but some of our manufacturers have actually experienced a sharp increase in sales. Reasons for this include increased demand for whatever the part the manufacturer produces. If they're producing medical supplies, PPE, or other parts that are in big demand right now, they may have benefited because of the current circumstances. The other reason for an increase in sales may be because of supplier reduction. While some OEM and high-tiered manufacturers suffered due to a reduction in suppliers, those suppliers that survived were in a position to pick up the volume of business abandoned by those that went out of business, and therefore they benefited from this. And then the third potential outcome is many manufacturers were just forced to pivot. The mayor talked about this a little bit at the beginning of his remarks. Many manufacturers chose to pivot their business model or were forced to in order to remain in business. Those that chose to pivot their business model to supplying PPE supplies or other products did so because either demand for their standard products diminished or demand for PPE supplies was so high, they decided to take advantage of the market opportunity if they had the capability of making those parts. Or third, out of a sense of duty, some companies just decided that they would do whatever they could to help government and commercial institutions by doing their part. So then it kind of shifted the second part of your question in terms of what CMTC is doing to help these companies. And as Jim mentioned earlier, we've had to pivot our own market approach to help the immediate and near-term needs of California manufacturers. CMTC was a recipient of a portion of the CARES Act funding, which allocated funds to CMTC for the sole purpose of identifying the needs of small and medium-sized manufacturers throughout the state and offering solutions to help them survive and recover. So CMTC quickly developed a program to respond to the emerging needs of manufacturers. Our program is really a simple two-step process. First, through our extensive outreach program, we start by scheduling a discovery assessment meeting between the manufacturer and one of our manufacturing business consultants. And then second, after the discovery assessment is completed, we write up a summary report with a proposed plan of action. Through the plan of action, we identify what we determine to be the manufacturer's highest priorities and then outline an approach based on how CMTC can help the manufacturer solve the problems it's facing. And through this process, we look to address immediate concerns as well as long-term recovery. CMTC's got a very robust training program to train employees in new skills and efficiencies, and we leverage ETP funding to help offset the costs associated with the training. We offer services from building a new website to helping manufacturers improve their cybersecurity. We are also helping companies get quality management system or QMS certifications that will help them sell their products into new markets that require a specific quality standard be met. So one example of a company that we're currently helping is David's Cutting, an apparel manufacturer based in Vernon. Prior to the pandemic, David's Cutting had 67 employees, but due to the downswing in orders, David's had to reduce its labor force to just 25 employees. In order to remain in business, David's Cutting had to shift its focus from retail fashion designs to manufacturing medical gowns. David's Cutting was able to win some contracts for manufacturing the medical gowns, but once the initial contracts ran their course, they found it difficult to gain new customers without having the right QMS system in place. The medical gown industry is regulated by the FDA, which set forth a requirement called FDA 21 CFR Part 820, which outlines current goods manufacturing practice regulations for the design and manufacture of finished goods intended for human use. Additionally, a large customer of David's Cutting required that it adhere to state and federal employment laws. So they needed a full HR services audit and the completion of harassment training for all of its employees. They also needed help to rebrand themselves from a consumer apparel company to a manufacturer of medical gowns. David's Cutting subsequently asked CMTC to provide training in preparation for it to become certified to the FDA GMP standards, to provide the HR audit and harassment training, as well as marketing assistance. CMTC has since put together a comprehensive statement of work outlining how we will provide these services to them. And this is just one of many companies that we are currently helping or have helped in the past. And again, we are looking to identify anybody that's in need of this type of help and services. And we ask those who are on this call, please reach out to us and let us know how we can help.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to our entire panel, Elliot, Gary, and Chris, for sharing ways that CMTC can directly help small to medium-sized manufacturers in Los Angeles and throughout the state with no and low cost assistance. So I am now happy to introduce John Dyck, CEO of CESMII, who will discuss increasing resilience in manufacturing, establishing a national manufacturing guard.
Thanks, Linda. It's my privilege today to share with you an important national initiative that I and my fellow Institute leaders have been driving forward. This initiative outlines a number of vital strategies that will enable us as a nation to build a more resilient manufacturing base here in the US. For those of you that don't know CESMII, we're headquartered here in LA, as the mayor pointed out. We're one of 15 manufacturing innovation institutes that make up the Manufacturing USA network. You see those listed here on this slide. And it's been a real privilege to work with my peer institute CEOs on this important initiative. I'd like to start by mentioning that we don't have much time for questions today, but I will invite you to visit mfgguard.com, and you'll see that on a slide at the end, to review the frequently asked questions there and to share any additional questions and comments by entering them into the Q&A box. Next slide, please, Linda. By way of background, we would like to begin by sharing information about the scope and impact of our institutes. Collectively, these 15 institutes reflect the interests of more than 2,100 member companies, academic institutions, and local governments, nonprofit government agencies. Excuse me. The first manufacturing institute was kicked off in 2012. Institutes are funded by one of three sponsoring agencies: the Department of Commerce, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Defense. In aggregate, the investment reflects more than $1.3 billion of federal funding and an additional $1.5 billion of non-federal co-investment. Our workforce development activities have impacted more than an estimated 670,000 individuals to date. All of these features and activities are designed with the goal of addressing US competitiveness in advanced manufacturing across different business sectors to meet the needs and the missions of our sponsoring agencies. Next slide, please. Today, we want to share with you our thoughts and vision on how our country might create a more resilient manufacturing infrastructure to ensure we are prepared for and can effectively respond to crises. The ideas that you will hear about in this presentation came about as the Institute directors started having calls during the early days of the COVID-19 outbreak here in the US. Our first COVID-related conference call on March 20th was initially focused on how we could help each other in our Institute responses to the outbreak, working with our local communities, working with our companies and stakeholders, and trying to address their needs and the needs of the nation. Over time, these weekly conversations evolved into a concern. There have been and continue to be a number of op-ed type publications correctly declaring that our country needs to increase our manufacturing resiliency in the face of crises, as uncovered by COVID-19. And we certainly agree with that, but we also felt that there were relatively few specific, actionable, yet bold ideas being put forth on how we could rise to the challenge as a nation. Excuse me. So we came up with several ideas on our own, and that is what we want to share with you today. The four pillars of our strategy are to create a national manufacturing guard to ensure we have people and resources ready to respond, a national supply chain data exchange to provide infrastructure for real-time supply and demand signals and improve the way information flows from suppliers to the manufacturers. The Technology Core to provide public service and manufacturing career opportunities for young Americans, and a Resilient Manufacturing Advisory Council to provide advice and input to the federal government. To be clear, these are our initial thoughts, and we are sharing them with the goal of soliciting your feedback and comment. Our institutes are regularly invited to provide information and updates to Congress, and we understand that some of these concepts have been picked up at that level, and we're certainly excited about that. Next slide, please. These 4 pillars are being proposed with the goal of developing a resilient, agile, secure manufacturing base necessary to support our economic and national security. The activities will span industry sectors and involve public and private stakeholders. They will create supply chain efficiency during normal times and offer critical infrastructure to power supply chains during crisis response, while also offering young Americans from all backgrounds opportunities to gain advanced manufacturing skills. Next slide, please. I'll first describe the concept of the manufacturing guard as one of the 4 proposed pillars. We frame National Manufacturing Guard as a reserve of industry volunteers who are trained and empowered to, in times of crisis, help manage manufacturing supply chains, logistics infrastructure, and workforce resources. Agile realignment of supply chains, particularly in a crisis, is not an easy task, and we believe that readiness, planning, and training for this eventuality will make an enormous difference. We make the analogy to the National Guard's readiness to defend our country to propose the idea of the National Manufacturing Guard. We envision this group to be comprised of leading subject matter experts in manufacturing and production, where participants may volunteer for service individually or be nominated by their organizations. Companies from all industry sectors would be incented to engage via appropriate tax or other economic and policy mechanisms. This body of experts will be tasked to understand critical supply chain gaps and develop system-level plans nationally and regionally to prepare and forecast issues, including technology needs and policy frameworks, such as the handling of intellectual property. Members of the National Manufacturing Guard would assemble and train periodically for agile and effective response during a crisis to mitigate scenarios that threaten supply chains and impede immediate availability and access to necessary products across the country or within a region as dictated by the state's needs. You're probably asking how this might work. While a lot of details will have to be defined, we envision that in a crisis, a state or the federal government would call up the National Manufacturing Guard to rapidly assess demand and supply signals and bring to bear their collective knowledge and their advanced preparation to reconfigure supply chains. To perform their mission, the members will coordinate across agencies. They'll use the National Supply Chain Data Exchange infrastructure, which I'll speak to momentarily, and will mentor and network with Technology Core volunteers, which are the 2 pillars you'll hear about next. Through the National Manufacturing Guard training and engagement, these participants will be our nation's experts in resilient supply chains, and they will be poised to help our nation speedily deploy the material and human resources required to face a crisis. Next slide, please, Linda. Our initial efforts will be to engage this ecosystem to gather feedback and ideas, identify relevant stakeholders and interested parties, and work to flesh out the salient details of the National Guard, including the command and control authorities at state and federal local levels, the national entity responsible for execution of the mission, the operations, including personnel structure, specializations and supply chains that are critical for resiliency and scope of the mission and training, the recruitment process for subject matter experts, and last but not least, ideas on what incentives would encourage health and appropriate company and individual participation. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, there are a couple of elements relating to the manufacturing supply chain, particularly around number 1, developing a secure supply chain backbone powered by real-time supply data from manufacturing operations and demand signals, and 2, being able to provide visibility into and then analyze that data to create actionable responses and strategies at both a local and national level, so that looking forward, we'll be much better positioned to respond to disruptions during crises. That's what the national supply chain data is all about. It became clear early in this pandemic that the dramatic disruption of both supply and demand would have a substantial impact on our ability to meet both the immediate needs of the healthcare providers and consumers across the country. It was equally clear that existing supply chain visibility and response solutions were inadequate for disruption on this scale. Many have written about and tried to document these failures, but given the magnitude of the challenge, it's clear that a thoughtful, well-orchestrated and national strategy is essential for us to ensure that we emerge from this experience with a truly resilient supply chain and manufacturing base. There are plenty of supply chain exchanges that enable commerce and transactions using contemporary technologies, but the urgent need for immediate, accurate data about suppliers' manufacturing operations in the face of disruptions is not readily accessible. The remarkable reality for most manufacturers is that the tools they use to collaborate with their suppliers are largely unchanged in the last 2 to 3 decades. The vast majority of supplier communications, believe it or not, still happens via faxes, phone calls, and email. Responding with agility when demand rises or falls precipitously, as we just heard from the previous speakers, requires immediate and precise responses to countless urgent questions. We need to immediately be able to answer questions about available capacity, for example, right now, the status and health and quality parameters of existing goods being produced right now, the status of orders that can either be quickly retracted or accelerated, the status of all relevant inventory and work in progress right now, what's available in the warehouse or distribution center so we can make intelligent substitutions for the right SKUs. These are remarkably difficult to answer in real time. And if the manufacturers can't find the answers, except by brute force, no way they can respond to emergency orders in a timely manner. Clearly, this needs to be addressed, and the fact that it hasn't been addressed yet, I think, speaks to the inherent complexities, the lack of standards, accessibility of low-cost technologies, and the lack of policies and support on a national scale for this type of initiative. This is the challenge we propose to tackle. We will invest in proof of concepts that will serve to demonstrate the feasibility of a secure, trusted, end-to-end national supply chain data backbone. This will provide automated mechanisms for suppliers, many of which are small and medium manufacturers that don't have access to sophisticated supply chain tools, to provide their manufacturing customers with a pre-structured data set from their manufacturing operations in real time and without the need of any human involvement. This initiative would also involve the creation of a specific set of supply chain visibility and resiliency tools and key performance indicators designed to leverage this new flow of data in real time.
So John is back with us now. I'm going to give the floor back to John.
Thank you, Linda. I apologize. I have no idea what happened, but if you can take us to the next slide, please, I'd appreciate it. Much like what I have described for the manufacturing guard, we recognize that there's a lot of work to be done to put this supply chain data exchange into operation on a national scale. From a policy perspective, we need to facilitate the creation of an open operating structure and decision-making authority trusted by manufacturers, big and small. And we also need to ensure that the incentive, the value is there to ensure that organizations participate and contribute data to this data exchange. We envision that a separate trusted organization will be required to facilitate the creation of the necessary technologies like the supply chain backbone and the tools, and work to effectively anonymize any data that is to be shared and maintain the exchange. This group will also need to develop standards for how data is requested and exchanged, develop standardized KPIs, standardized methods for making data anonymous, and a clear plan to ensure that the exchange is absolutely secure. The proof of concept we envision will demonstrate all of these capabilities. Next slide, please. I also mentioned that one of the 4 key pillars is about the essential needs related to workforce development. Developing career pathways for diverse domestic talent, giving them opportunities to engage in high-value jobs and national service opportunities, and identifying opportunities for those individuals, and particularly those from underserved communities, to gain access to and experience in advanced manufacturing jobs. This is absolutely critical. Those are among the objectives of what we've called out as the technology core. We envision the core to be modeled after other service-oriented programs like the Peace Corps or Teach for America, but in this case, focused on STEM and with the manufacturing orientation. The program will identify and organize a diverse talent pool of young Americans aged 18 to 24, offer them an opportunity for national service in industry or perhaps even in partnership with our manufacturing institutes. It'll give those students an opportunity to be introduced to cutting-edge topics in science, in engineering, and manufacturing. These could range from mechanics, robotics, and smart manufacturing technologies to things like materials, chemicals, and biology, or even advanced computing, machine learning, and data science. One might envision, for example, that a high school graduate intending to go to college could participate in this program during a gap year. Perhaps a graduating high school senior doesn't yet know whether college is the answer. Maybe he or she is considering going directly to work or into military service. Ultimately, the Technology Corps would offer either of these candidates the chance to get real-world practical experience in a manufacturing setting, and would almost certainly either go to college or the military or the workplace with a much more informed, practical view of how industry works, how things are made, and perhaps even how commerce happens in the US. We want the Technology Corps to be as inclusive as possible and will encourage the recruiting of talent from a diverse pool across all communities in the US. In the best case, many participants in the Corps would decide to pursue careers related to manufacturing, helping all of us build the talent pipeline that we so clearly need to drive next generation manufacturing in years to come. Next slide, please. Just like the manufacturing guard and data exchange, work is needed to define the policy and operations efforts with respect to the Technology Corps. The operations entity will need to engage a diverse set of stakeholders, including groups such as the member associations listed here, along with our Manufacturing USA institutes and others, to ensure that they cast the widest net possible to reach prospective candidates for the Corps. Ultimately, they'll need to build the most effective experiential learning programs, which we imagine will include internships, on-the-job training, apprenticeships, etc. One might also envision opportunities for industry or institute subject matter experts to weigh in on educational content development to prioritize the skills needed by participants and reflect what industry, and potentially even to act as mentors or hosts for those participants. It's an exciting opportunity that we would like to see move forward in the days to come. Next slide, please, Linda. The final pillar of the Resilient Manufacturing Program is the recommendation of a Resilient Manufacturing Advisory Council that would be set up to manage the execution of these initiatives moving forward. This body will comprise representative stakeholders from industry, government, including state and local governments, and academia that are leading subject matter experts in supply chain, manufacturing technologies, and best practices. We envision that the council will provide its recommendations across federal government agencies on strategies to best execute the missions and improve the efficacy of the manufacturing guard, the data exchange, and the Technology Corps. At a high level, the advisory council would, number one, assess the mapping of existing supply networks to understand critical gaps in domestic manufacturing capabilities and infrastructure. Two, identify critical feedstock limitations and materials and process development needs. Three, point to opportunities to refine current and design new technologies for optimized system operations. And four, overall coordination to manage the work to build a more resilient and flexible manufacturing base here in the US. Next slide, please. There are many issues to address and details to formulate towards this vision. Our recommended next steps are to form a resilient manufacturing task force tasked to convene private and public stakeholders such as yourselves and to gather input and frame recommendations for the 4 pillars of this program. As I've outlined here, the National Manufacturing Guard, a National Supply Chain Data Exchange, the Technology Core, and a Resilient Manufacturing Advisory Council. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we want to remind you that we are sharing these as an initial set of thoughts, and we are inviting comments and feedback. We believe that these are bold ideas, but actionable. The dialogue, discussion, and debate that we hope these ideas will stimulate are an important part of finding the right path forward, and we feel a sense of urgency on this topic. As COVID-19 has highlighted, it's critical for any nation, for our nation, to ensure we have a resilient and agile manufacturing supply chain to promote our national security and way of life. The framework of public-private partnerships could be leveraged to establish these types of programs, and we know that realizing these ideas will require new authorities, programs, investment, and a collaborative approach between the public and private sector. Next slide. With that, I'd like to thank you all, and particularly the mayor and his office, for the privilege of sharing this vital initiative with you today. Please visit mfgguard.com for more information. We absolutely invite your input and ideas. You can also share ideas by emailing us at info@mfgguard.com. Final slide, next slide, please. Last but not least, I'd like to invite you to engage with us here at CESMII. We're here headquartered in LA, and we're aggressively focused on inspiring and investing in smart manufacturing, innovations and capabilities for small, medium, and large manufacturers, and from all industries. You can find us at CESMII.org or email us at info@CESMII.org. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you so much, John. That was really interesting, and we really appreciate it. CMTC, we really value our partnership with CESMII. I'd invite all of the panelists to please turn your video on now. We'll get to Q&A, and on the screen there's also information about how to get in touch with CMTC or CESMII, in addition to what John mentioned previously about info@mfgguard.org.com. I'm not remembering correctly, I apologize.
.com.
.org, okay. And for any type of assistance from CMTC, whether it's with help with supply chain or meeting with a business stabilization consultant or any of the other areas that we spoke about, please go to cmtc.com, or you can touch base by phone or email with Rosanna Fong. And feel free to reach out with the outreach advisor at CESMII, Mike Yost. His email is on this slide. So with that, I'm happy to go back to Q&A. And we do have a few questions here. That was answered already. Okay, manufacturing isn't seen as a very attractive line of work for millennials today. Will the technology core strategy also take this into account in formulating a framework to get interest from this demographic in joining manufacturing, e.g. gamification and the Internet of Things? And I suspect there are a couple of people who'd be interested in replying to this question.
I can start, but as you pointed out, Linda, I'm sure everyone here has a perspective and would love to hear that as well. So I think fundamentally the answer has to be yes, right? I think the idea that today when workers walk into a plant, one of the last things they do is stick the most intelligent piece of hardware on the planet in their pocket, which is their smart device, either in their pocket or their locker. They go to work and then they come back and grab it at the end of the day. That's absolutely a travesty. That device and the ability to interact with a smart process or a smart piece of equipment in a much more helpful and intelligent way is exactly what we ought to be promoting through the idea and through the investment in smart manufacturing. I think, and that's one of the, I believe, essential goals of smart manufacturing, to engage what we call citizen technologists, to make innovation so ubiquitous that it's not just the engineers or the IT developers that can sit in a back office and build smart software, smart tools to help improve the process on the shop floor. This is about a set of capabilities that everybody can engage in, and that you can use the very devices that you engage with on a day-to-day basis, on an hour-by-hour basis, in every other setting to help improve and engage and contribute to improving your operations. And I think this is going to be a key aspect of how we engage this generation, not just the notion that you've got compelling technology to bring to bear, but also the notion that they can engage and actually contribute, right? That's part of what we all want to know, that when we're stepping out on the shop floor, we're not just going there in a routine manner to do our job, which is key, but that I can actually step in and use the capabilities at my fingertips to improve and to help and to create value for my organization, use my creativity and use my intelligence much more effectively.
Thank you, John. Jim, would you like to add to that? And specifically, the person who asked the question, commented very appropriately that this is especially important given the industry's need for a skilled workforce and to replace the seasoned veterans who are retiring. Jim?
Yeah, I think, first of all, you'd be surprised at how much technology already exists in manufacturing. I dare say when I go on a plant, I came from manufacturing. I've been in manufacturing for more than 30 years. I'm amazed at the technology and the IIoT stuff that's presently residing in manufacturers. And I think this is a great time to learn more about manufacturing because it's Manufacturing Month. And there are a lot of virtual events going on throughout the state. So the folks that are interested in finding out about the technological improvements within manufacturing have a chance to check it out. And I would strongly ask them if they would like to look at this, is to go on our website. We have a whole list of all the events that are going on throughout the state. We're also loading content for those events that have already taken place. And if you go on our site and look under resources, you'll see all of this taking place. I mean, we have all kinds of robotics. There's all kinds of smart manufacturing dashboarding going on. We've have manufacturers that sometimes can run their business off an iPad. So there's a lot going on in manufacturing, which would be very attractive to folks that are interested in gaming and IoT. So I wouldn't discard it as being something that's going to take place in the future. It's already taking place right now.
And we're partnering actively with the community colleges and school systems and many other organizations to get the word out and enable the younger generations to get excited about manufacturing as a career and learn more. Would anyone else like to comment on that question?
Linda, one last thing. I think it's more important than ever before, and thank you for reminding me about us partnering with community colleges and universities, is that it's really going to take a focus on science, technology, and math for people to get into manufacturing these days. And those types of courses will give you the skills you need to have a successful long-term career in manufacturing. Without them, I don't think there's going to be a place for you in the manufacturing. I think all of the repetitive jobs are being integrated through technology. And I think the future of manufacturing will be technological. And I think without those kinds of courses, you will not be prepared to go into manufacturing.
Thank you, Jim. Very, very good points.
Yeah, so Linda, I would like to add that, as people are basically, increasingly using more advanced technologies on the shop floors, robots, advanced 3D printers, a lot of augmented reality, virtual reality, for the training purposes, the shop floors themselves are kind of changing. So that is, making things different. People working in manufacturing do work with really advanced manufacturing technology. And this is a message that we have to make sure that we do a better job in communicating. The other aspect that younger generation, gets usually excited about is that a meaningful cause. They don't want to do routine jobs. So they really want to make a difference. And we have to, again, work on that messaging that working in manufacturing sector, how it basically solves one of the, some of the biggest challenges, whether it be, aerospace, whether it be, health sector challenges. So I think advent of advanced technologies on the manufacturing shop floors, as well as making connection between manufacturing and how it is, solving really challenging problem. Both of them will be needed to make sure that we can get younger generation excited about manufacturing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. Next question, this is for John Dyke. What do you see as key barriers to success of this new GUARD initiative? Will this election or government makeup, whether new or continued, help or hinder?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. From our perspective, we were privileged to see this National Guard paper, which, by the way, you can find at mfgguard.com as well. Was very quickly picked up by Senators Coons from Delaware and Marco Rubio, so both a Democrat and a Republican, to take this content, these ideas, and turn them into a bicameral bill that was introduced to the Senate floor just a couple of weeks ago. And so from our perspective, this is an initiative that we believe will see funding and support regardless of the election outcome. This is our goal. This is not a partisan issue. This is obviously all about ensuring that whether it's a small regionalized disruption that we're planning for, or that it's a significant disruption of something like we've seen in the past year, we're in a position to respond in a much more productive and helpful way and create the resilient future that we all need. So this is not a partisan issue, and from our perspective, we're cautiously optimistic that these ideas will become a reality in the coming months, regardless of the election.
Thank you, John. We're a CNC machine shop in LA County. We're looking to fill up our capacity due to the aerospace slowdown. What is the best resource for us to use to find new customers that are onshoring? I'd like to give Chris and Gary a chance to field this question.
Who would you like?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think, Jay, that CMTC would probably be in a good position to help you. As I described our program earlier, through our conducting an assessment with you to better understand your the impact that the aerospace industry has had on your business, we could best identify one of our resources to help you maybe develop a strategy and how you might want to pivot your efforts from aerospace into identifying new markets. Really, it's a strategic initiative. We have people that are strategists that specialize in this kind of thing, and working with you and identifying what some of your core competencies are to help identify what adjacent markets or other markets are out there that might represent an industry that you could very well service. And by taking you through that process, I'm sure we could help you identify additional new markets that you could pivot to. But yeah, we could definitely talk more about that.
Thank you. Gary, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. I think in this case, we do have a lot of opportunities for what we call onshoring or reshoring, especially machine parts, metal fabricated parts. What I'm going to encourage the person who asked that question is to contact CMTC directly. We can provide a profile, a supplier profile, get your capabilities listed on our database so that we are ready and prepared to fulfill a person's request, a company's request, and do a match with your capabilities. So, this is a great introduction to reshoring and onshoring. And as Jim mentioned earlier, I think the opportunity is now. So please reach out to CMTC and get on our website. And we do have supplier forms available. And also Rosanna Fong can be great support here. So yeah, let's do something right now and get this done immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. We have time for one more question. However, we're not going to leave anyone hanging. We have all of the questions in the Q&A. For the few that we don't have time to get to, we can get your answers back to you both directly and in post-summit information with the recording and slides and the answers, excuse me, your questions answered. But we'll close it out with this one last question and then closing remarks. Smart manufacturing requires advanced skills and investment in technologies. Most manufacturers are already dealing with pressures on margins. What is the panel's perspective on how this will all get funded? So, I think I'll give that to Jim to respond to, and John, if you'd like to.
I think there's two pieces. The first piece is training. And I think Chris mentioned earlier that there's employment training panel funds available to help with training, to help offset the cost of training. And I've also got to say that the cost of technology is coming down dramatically. I know we have been working with CESMII to work with small manufacturers on sensoring. And the sensors, and first of all, a lot of equipment already have sensors. Second of all, the price of sensors have come down significantly to be able to implement it. And then lastly, all of the manufacturers of technologies or any kind of automation are really right now trying their darndest to keep their doors open as well. And you'll notice that you'll begin to see a lot of leasing coming out for equipment. So the whole idea and have to upfront the cost of a piece of equipment is pretty much out the window now. There's a lot of leasing going on, which makes it much more affordable for a manufacturer to get into introducing automation into their workplace. So there's offset that we can do for training. There's leasing and low cost. There's leasing for equipment like robotics, and then sensoring is very low cost and can be practically applied by almost any manufacturer, large and small.
Thank you, Jim.
John? Just add briefly that smart manufacturing has been the domain of the Fortune 1000, but increasingly, and this is at the heart of our efforts here, I talk about democratization, reduce dramatically investing in the systematic challenges that prevent us from implementing because things are too costly and too complicated, reducing the level of expertise required to both implement and then sustain this kind of technology when it lands on the shop floor, or when your team decides to execute it or implement it on the shop floor. So as Jim rightly pointed out, this is happening right now, and we here at CESMII have some great opportunities. We're about a week away from announcing another round of Smart Manufacturing Innovation Project grants, where we're asking the country to come back with creative ideas about things that you can do in your operation with our help to create a shining lighthouse of what smart manufacturing looks like. That will inspire hundreds, if not thousands of others to do something similar and in a way that's more and more cost effective every time it happens. So that's at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Thank you so much. So I think a key lesson learned is reach out to us, to CMTC and to CESMII. We're really here to guide you and help. With that said, I'd really like to thank Mayor Garcetti, all of our panelists, including Jim Watson from CMTC, John Dyke from CESMII, Dr. S.K. Gupta from the USC Center for Advanced Manufacturing, and Elliot Dratch, Gary Steinberg, and Chris Meraki from CMTC. And I'd be remiss not to thank those behind the scenes, including Ricardo Vasquez from the Mayor's Office, John Lee and Roy Koch from CESMII, and most of all, every one of you who joined us this morning for the LA Mayor's Manufacturing Summit. Together, we are quite a dynamic, positive force in getting through this pandemic, keeping each other safe, driving economic recovery, and building resilience in this amazing community of ours, Los Angeles. Thank you.